Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ask, Learn, Grow, the show where the Reef team answer questions and share updates and insights from the digital marketing industry. I've got Head of Performance Media with me today, Matt Yeadham, and we're going to be continuing the talk about Google Ads, and we're going to be talking about responsive search ads. So this kind of builds on the topic of machine learning, which we've been discussing in some of our recent videos. So Matt, what might be good to start? What are responsive search ads for those who might not be aware of them?
Yeah, so they're a fairly recent addition to Google Ads. Recent as in the last 12 months or so. But Google have been pretty adamant about getting every account to start using them. In the past, when writing ad copy, we'd write ad copy that's unique. So each headline and description, they were together as a single unit. And then from there, we would test our ad copy against one another. And with that, we would determine what the best messaging was. And we'd use that with things like, combine it with things like optimize for best performing, and then Google would select the best ad copy to show based on things like click-through rate, ad relevancy, and conversion rate. So when responsive search ads came along, they kind of shook up the game a little bit. They're a little bit different. So rather than structuring our ad copy as single units, we give multiple headlines and descriptions as one unit. So for example, we give 10 headlines, we give 4 description lines, and then we say to Google, hey, work out what the best combination of these ads are. And it'll actually go and optimize those ads. So it'll chop and change them and test them against one another on the fly. Where it's interesting though is in how they actually go about doing that. Rather than looking at things like click-through rate, conversion rate, ad relevancy, it also takes into consideration the user and the user who's actually looking at that ad, which makes them a little bit different to the way standard ad copies worked in the past.
Okay, sounds interesting and also quite useful. So can you explain a little bit more about how they actually work then, sort of the mechanics of it?
Yeah, so like I said, you give them 10 headlines and 4 description lines, and then you kind of leave them to go do their thing. The way they actually optimize, as I said, or kind of alluded to, is a little bit different. You can think about it a little bit like this. The messaging that resonates with you might not exactly be the same messaging that resonates with me. So Google's taking that into account, and what they're looking at, and it kind of sounds scary to say, but they're analyzing up to 7 million signals you give off each month, whether that be across Google Search, YouTube, places you've visited, things you do on your phone, how long you've got the pages, what kind of pages you look like, a huge amount of information they're actually using. And what they're really looking for is the kind of messaging that would resonate with you as a user, and try to show you one of those headlines and description lines in combination with one another to give you I know it's a kind of an overused term in the industry, but the right ad at the right time. So with that in mind, they'll show you an ad that's similar to you, would resonate with you. So the way they'd go about doing that is looking at other users who are similar to you. So other users who give off fairly similar signals on a either weekly or monthly basis, and use that to determine what's going to be the best ad to show to you at the right time. Because in the past, the way we would run with expanded text ads was we would just write those 3 ad copy and then allow them to test against one another, things like click-through rate, ad relevancy, and conversion rate. Now we're actually taking that user into consideration, and just a little bit more about who they are.
Okay, and why would you use these? I take it the goal is to improve performance while reducing the manual load of running lots of different tests. But what's your kind of experience, and why would somebody want to use these in their search ads?
They're really useful at rapidly determining what messaging works, and importantly, what messaging doesn't work. So it also allows us to tap into all of the information Google has on users that aren't necessarily available to us as marketers. So we can tap into those 7 million signals without really knowing anything about what those signals are, and just allow Google to kind of optimize and test against those with that data set in mind. They're also a really great addition to run alongside standard search ads, because you can test them rapidly, because you can put those headlines in, you can start to get an idea relatively quickly with enough traffic what messaging is really working and what isn't, and then incorporate that into your standard text ads as well, because standard text ads are still vital. You still need them to push out into the account, where responsive search ads add that additional machine learning layer to it that hasn't been available in the past.
And from using responsive search ads, have you seen the performance has generally been good and worth adding, or are there any sort of pitfalls or things that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so we've seen with responsive search ads, you usually see a little bit of a lift in click-through rates. I wouldn't expect a massive lift in click-through rates, but you definitely do see an improvement. You'll notice anywhere up to about 5 to 10% of a lift in overall click-through rates when you're running the responsive search ads versus if you're just running them with standard text ads. The other benefit they have is Google have what they call the Opta score built into all their accounts. So by improving and adding responsive search ads to the account, you can actually boost up your Opta score on the Google Ads account, which it's not confirmed, but it can have some positive impacts on your overall ads account. So they're definitely worthwhile running in there. So yeah, but overall, yeah, we do see a nice little lift up in the click-through rates, usually between 5 and 10%.
Cool. And
when we're utilizing them.
Are there any sort of downsides, things to be aware of, things to watch out for when you're setting these up?
So for us, because we run the single keyword ad group model, there is an option in the recommendations tab which allows you to automatically build the responsive search ads. So it'll just grab all your headlines and description lines and kind of dump them all together. Where that doesn't work is, for us, we put the keyword in the headline, in headline 1 typically. That kind of breaks when a user's not searching for that keyword, but that keyword might show up, which can have a negative impact on ad relevancy. So we need to keep that in mind. So if you're running single keyword ad groups, what you can do is actually pin your headlines. We tend to pin all of the headline 1s so they're still relevant to the keyword. And then kind of dump in our 10 headlines for headline 2, 3, and then the 4 for description lines. So that's definitely pitfall number 1. Pitfall number 2 is you can't measure which headlines are actually performing the best. The way Google export the data out is just in a big Excel sheet that you've got to look at, and it doesn't really give you a granular breakdown on which messaging's actually working, which can make it a little bit frustrating. So that's where your standard text ads come in. So you can test with your standard text tag, see which ones are working, see which ones are the best, and then add them into your responsive search ads. And then finally, because they're chopping and changing the headlines, sometimes you might have some clients who must comply with, say, the local law. So they have to have some sort of disclaimer in their ads. So that always needs to be taken into consideration. So again, recommend that you pin those headlines in there if you have to have a disclaimer. Otherwise, Google will just chop and change. You might end up with some messaging that doesn't comply with local law anymore. So there are definitely some pitfalls that you got to be aware of anytime you run them.
When you say pin the headline, does that mean Google will always use that headline and chop and change the description?
Yep. So you can pin it in place. And you can pin multiple ones, but you can always say, I just want these ones in headline 1, or this specific message in headline 1, nothing else. And then the other ones you can chop and change and do whatever you want with.
Cool. So there's a degree of control in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
In the past, I think when it first came out, it wasn't. And so we were pretty skeptical of using them. But they've fixed up a lot of that in the last 12 months or so.
So you definitely recommend adding this to your campaign mix and testing.
Yep. Run responsive search ad per ad group, and a minimum of 3 standard ads. So that's your 3 headlines, 2 descriptions, 3 of those and 1. And then you should be good. That'll also help boost your Google Opta score as well.
Great stuff. Thanks for sharing that information, Matt. We've covered responsive search ads, I think, in enough detail for this call. So if you've got any questions about responsive search ads or any digital marketing related topic, we're always happy to help. Do send them in. If you'd like to put a burning question to the team to answer in one of the future videos, send those in too, and we'll see what we can do. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be notified of when the next video is available. Apart from that, thanks all for watching and enjoy the rest of the day.